Welcome back to the Gotham Sports Machine. I'm your host, Jack Healy, joined by my co-host, Mark Healy. And today we got a special guest, Fantasy Pros expert Evan Tarracciano. And he's going to give us a rundown on the tight end position today. How you feeling today, Evan?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well, Jack. How are you?
I'm good. I mean, we got fantasy football right here. I can smell it. Everybody's getting ready for their drafts. And I think even fantasy experts, wherever like anybody who goes into a draft, you look at the tight end position, it's a crapshoot. The top two guys, Bowers and McBride, numbers wise, you look at it and you feel comfortable, but every year there is no more unpredictable position than a tight end position.
hmm
Because you don't, do you draft them really early? Do you get your guy second, third round? Or do you wait and you try to get one of these safer guys, fourth, fifth, sixth round? It's always a conundrum. You could get a league winner early or you could get a bust. So when you look at this class of tight ends and when you look at this draft, how are you approaching this draft?
Yeah, I just wrote an article about this on the site not all that long ago, and I basically said that, there are certainties in life. It's death, taxes, and analysts basically saying that there is way too many tight ends to pick from in the second and third tiers. And it seems like every single year we constantly have this discussion of, yeah, there is a elite tier of two, three, four guys, and you can pick from them. Don't get me wrong. I would feel phenomenal about having a team that had Brock Bowers or McBride or Colston Loveland on it. It does give you a leg up on the competition, but the fundamental question is the cost enough? Is the underlying cost of taking Bowers and McBride at the end of the second round, which is where they're going right now, justifiable? Yeah, in some aspects it is. I mean, the production that they put out is just as great as it is with an upside wide receiver too in a lot of cases. And that's great. But you have to almost treat it like a case by case scenario. Do I think that McBride is going to have as many targets this year as he did in last year? I don't think so. Is Bowers going to be as featured with Las Vegas this year? I mean, he's certainly the passing game that's there, but quarterback play is definitely going to be called into question. When did they make that transition to the rookie? How competitive will the team be this year? And if they transition to a rookie, yeah, the rookie quarterbacks do tend to like to throw to tight ends. It's something that we know of at this point, but how much of a detriment is that going to be to Bauer's overall upside? Like you said, I'm perfectly comfortable in waiting at the position. A lot of experts are. I'm fine if I enter a draft and I happen to have a Tyler Warren or a Sam Laporta or a Kyle Pitts, and I cannot believe that I'm saying that as my tight end to start with. But the costs that they have being able to be drafted in the seventh round, the eighth round, the ninth round, and some of the either players that I'm big on can be drafted even later on than that. I think is just giving you a leg up, especially at running back. The propensity of injuries at that position leads it. So I really want to kind of hammer home having as much depth there as I can.
So, I shared with you and Jack, I did some prep, for my column this week for the newspaper. Uh, you know, because I wanted to be able to speak at least a little intelligently on this subject. So, the idea that knowing, we've talked about this with other between Jack and myself and other guests in prior weeks about, being a fantasy expert's one thing. You have to
Mhm.
know the game too. You have to
Yeah.
know the things that are changing, the coaches that are changing, the quarterbacks that are changing. And you mentioned Bowers,
Yeah.
and whether or not he's going to be, a big target. Now, Kirk Cousins does have a history of
hmm
being a guy, and they say that he's going to be the starter to start the season. I mean, we'll see.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, but I would think that having Cousins there and not the rookie would actually increase Bauer's value, no, because he likes to throw to the tight end.
It does. It does. And this is going to be a case where let's just take a step back and think of, okay, well, if you are running the show for the Raiders, what's going to make the most sense? I mean, yeah, you have Kirk Cousins there. Does he probably give you a better chance of winning from the jump than your rookie does? Sure, he does. But are you really going to be playing for this year? Probably not. Are you going to be competitive this year within that division? Probably not. And if that's the case, and the transition is somewhat inevitably going to happen at some point, what will that then do ipso facto to Bowers? When he's out there, he's fantastic. I think we've seen it the last couple seasons, set records across the board. It was unfortunate he was dealing with the bumps and bruises from last year, but he was still just as much of a powerhouse as he was in his rookie season. I don't have any qualms about the talent of Bowers. It's more just if that transition were to happen in the Las Vegas Raiders bye week, what's that then going to look like for the second half of his year? And if they do ultimately then rely more on the run to be friendly towards the rookie underneath center, what's that going to do to the passing game for the Raiders? And will that loss of targets, detract enough from Bowers to push him down to third, fourth, fifth, as opposed to just being an unquestioned one or two?
Yeah, and I mean, when I look at this top 10 list, there is not one guy to me that doesn't have at least one thing that I'm like, I'm not like. I think every single guy has a caveat, whether it's
Mhm.
McBride and McBride Bowers don't have a stable quarterback room. Cousins is he'll be solid, but you don't know when he's gonna. It's not gonna be a consistent. Oh, Cousins is my starter for 17 games. That's not set in stone.
Right.
Brissett, he was a fantasy gem last year. If you had any of those guys in your stretch run, whether it was Michael Wilson, Trey McBride, he was thrown to them every single play because they were down by 30. And it was great. But is that sustainable? Is that gonna be a whole nother season of this year? It's hard for me to sell. It's hard for me to go into a draft and be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna buy in on a garbage offense and a garbage game script. I
Mhm.
just don't want to do that. Especially when you see it's mind-boggling to me that Kelsey's 11. Yes, he's
Mhm.
declining.
Yep.
Yes, he is Mahomes banged up. He's banged up. But when you look at his history as a fantasy tight end, he has never finished outside the top 10. Maybe his rookie season, he was
Mhm.
like 15 or something, but especially since Mahomes has been quarterback, he's barely finished outside the top five.
Yeah.
For me to just be like, oh, about Kelsey and an Andy Reid offense when he could be in one of the better situations, you could get him with and you were talking about value and value and value. I feel like that's just one of the best values right there.
Absolutely. And it's again something for people to consider is you don't want to base your projections on this year solely off of last year's statistics. Because if you end up doing that, you somewhat lose track of the variables that ended up happening. Yes, Trey McBride was phenomenal last year, led the position in points, but there were certain things that, if you take a step back, are they repeatable? He had nearly a 28% target share for the offense last year. Some of that was because Marvin Harrison was banged up. Some of that was because they were always in a pass first, mode because they were continually down. Well, now that you have Harrison back, and now that you ended up getting Jeremiah Love back there, and you're going to have him involved in the passing game as well. We saw the breakout of Wilson occur when, there wasn't quite as many mouths to feed on the field. Is that going to take away from the targets from McBride? If so, what's that then going to translate into this year? Players that have established histories, whether it's a Kelsey, whether it's going to be someone like a Kittle, that, we know that when they are out there, even if they're not 100%, it's going to be, feeding them consistently on a better offense with a better quarterback in a better position. And they happen to just be very comfortable in the offensive system that they're in. Um, Look, it's all about being, boom or bust. How comfortable are you dipping your toes into the water of uncertainty? If you're not, and if you want to just simply have a person that's going to give you that set it and forget it 10 points a week, the good news is that there's lots of different options for you to pick from this year. The bad news is that if you play things too conservatively, you're not going to win in fantasy football. That's not how you end up winning.
That's why I always lose, Evan.
Yeah,
Um, when I did one of those names that you're talking about, one of those veteran names, when you can't just go off last year, is Mark Andrews, obviously,
right.
with the Ravens, who's one of the best tight ends, fantasy tight ends ever, really, when you think about it. Coming off his career worst year, but he still had 5 touchdowns,
Yep.
and he was sharing time with Isaiah Likely. who's now gone, went to the Giants. And I
Hmm.
kind of linked those two together in my analysis this week because, to me, it was, Edwards, a lot of people think, Andrews could have a real nice bounce back year. Supposedly the offensive coordinator there really wants to, feature him in the offense. And, when they are throwing the ball, because they do run the ball a lot now, Likely's gone. He doesn't have to share the position as much. Do you kind of see Andrews being that guy that has a really nice bounce back year, and because he had such a bad year that he might be lurking in some of those later rounds for people to pick up?
Um, I am somewhat jaded, I suppose, in the fact that I've never been a massive Mark Andrews supporter. I mean, he does have redeeming qualities to him, don't get me wrong. And I think that the number one fantastic thing to consider about Andrews is the rapport that he has with Lamar Jackson. When anything goes wrong, he's going to be the read. We've heard an awful lot of hype about Zay Flowers, within this offense this year, how much more he's going to be involved, how many more targets he's going to soak up. I do think that, Bateman and a couple of the other receivers that they have can be more involved than before. But Andrews is that presence that's a steady thing for the team. It's still going to be a run first team. I fully expect that with Derrick Henry and Jackson back there. When it comes to Andrews, the part that has always scared me is how much of his production typically ends up coming from touchdowns and from the red zone. And if you're overly reliant upon things like that, what happens if you enter some of these stretches where the team just doesn't need him? If you happen to have a good Zay Flowers day or a good Derrick Henry day, well, you don't really need Mark Andrews to do much other than just be a body that's on the field. We saw that back in 2024. He had a great season, finished as the tight end five in football, but a lot of that was on the strength of his 11 touchdown receptions. That was more than halved last year, and he finished as the tight end 18. So the loss of Likely is definitely going to add a handful of targets for him. He'll still be on the field as much as possible, and I do anticipate it being a little bit more of a shift for a red zone play into a volume play for Andrews. But in an offense that tends to try to do clock control, try to run things through the defense, and try to just basically bludgeon you to death in the second half, Andrews is a little volatile for me in terms of a target that I would go out and look for.
When I look at Andrews, like rare, this I will say this is a rare opinion. I'll actually agree with my dad here a little bit more because
Oh, okay.
That's
to me,
very rare.
when I was watching, I watched a lot. I like the Ravens. I watched a lot of Ravens football last year, and I feel like the one thing Harbaugh was doing was he loved Isaiah Likely. That was his guy. He was
Mhm,
force feeding Isaiah Likely. Not that he didn't like Mark Andrews, but I feel like the departure of not only John Harbaugh, but you also lost Monken. You have an entirely new offensive system
mhm,
with Minter and Declan Doyle. And Declan Doyle's coming from the Bears, who just Colson Loveland's tight end three right now. Colson Loveland was just getting absolutely fed. They love their tight ends over in Chicago. So for me to be like, uh, Mark Andrews isn't gonna be like, and it's not even, I just think that the red zone will look a lot better and a lot more Mark Andrews. Yeah, he is a red zone merchant. He is a touchdown guy, but when he wasn't getting the looks, you saw the drop in the numbers. And I
mhm,
think he'll be getting a lot more of the looks. Zay Flowers, yeah, he's gonna have a great year. He's looked great last year, but Zay Flowers is what, 5'11"? He's not gonna get looks in the red zone. Derrick Henry, he's a red zone guy, but their play action game is so lethal with Lamar on the run. There's a reason that his first read's always Mark Andrews. He's a big guy, he's a great blocker. And this is a kind of lead to my next guy, with who I think is a little more boomer bust and has
mhm.
always been a complete red zone guy, especially last year, Dallas Goedert. He's scary.
Mhm,
Look at his fantasy history, you look at his numbers, it's like last year is a pretty big outlier as far as like overall production and
mhm.
finishing as a top tight end.
Yes.
You lose AJ Brown, so he's gonna get more looks in the offense, but is he gonna put up 11 touchdowns again? Are we really confident that this? Because even Devontae Smith is gonna get more looks. I feel like
Yeah.
everyone in this offense is just gonna get more looks, whether it's Mekhi Lemon, whether it's Saquon in the passing game.
Mhm.
11
Yeah.
touchdowns. I like Goddard, but I don't know about 11 touchdowns.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just to put a little bow on the Mark Andrews thing, and then I'll definitely touch on Goddard. Mark, if you had to take a guess, just a guess. Now keep in mind Andrews has been in the league since 2018. Do you know how many years or seasons he has more than 65 receptions? Which isn't like a big number, but 65 or more catches.
One.
One total. And that was in
Hey, I got it
2021.
right. Look at
You
that.
did. You did.
Wow, I got a
This is
guess
why they
right,
pay
and
you the
Jack agreed
big
with me on
bucks.
something. This is a hell of a
Exactly.
show, Evan. We got to
Exactly.
have you on more often.
Exactly. And this was a point that I just wanted to hammer home. Keep in mind a career arc as well. And if we're going to be talking about career arcs and kind of shifting over to that, yes, one person that has absolutely terrified me in the past to have him on my team is going to be Goddard. Why is that the case? Well, he is one of those players that I have always deemed to be a what if. What if Goddard actually was able to stay healthy for an entire season? Prior to last year, he's been, 10 games, 12 games, 11 games. He's constantly played banged up. But when he's been on the field, I think it's really difficult to cast a blind eye to the amount of production that he actually puts up. Is the 11 touchdowns a mirage, considering that his career high before that was back in 2019 with five? Yeah, I think there's going to be some regression there. I don't think that he's going to have 11 touchdowns. But at the same point, if you take away a talent like an A.J. Brown, the compensation for that with an overall target share upgrade, I think makes up for that, especially when you consider where his ADP is right now. And if you're trying to get into that bin of players that you can draft as a tight end two, but could put out a tight end one production, Goddard is someone that I am steadfastly drafting in all over the place where I can get my hands on him because he's coming at such a discount. So many managers get that once bitten, twice side, philosophy of I drafted this guy in the past. I drafted him in 2024. The guy ended up being the, tight end 25, only played 10 games for me, only had 40 catches. Never again. I'm just not going to do that. Well, that's fine. But if you're going to create that kind of a discount for me, I'll take that. I think that Philadelphia this year, after we saw a diminished Saquon Barkley last year, will revert into more of a passing, type team. I think that's something that they just will end up doing. It's going to be a more competitive division this year. I think that, Washington, assuming Jaden Daniels is going to be out there, the Giants with a full season of Jackson Dart out there, even just within the division, should push Philadelphia to a lot more competitive games, which is going to result in a higher passing total. So, with the caveat that, if Dallas Goedert is out there, he is going to put up tight end one numbers. Yes, expect a reduction here and there, but I think that he will be set for career highs in receptions and yards this year.
So a couple of the other tight ends I was looking at, Evan,
Yep.
were the two guys that shared time in Tennessee last year, and that was Okonkwo and Gunnar Helm. And those two guys shared time last year, both put up pretty decent numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Now Helm, who was a rookie, is now going to be the starter in Tennessee, and Okonkwo was going to the Commanders.
Right.
Where do you see those two guys? I mean, are those two guys kind of on the same level? Do you favor one over the other, or are these just two guys you should stay away from draft wise, even though they're both going to be tight end number one?
Yeah. Well, for me, I favor Okonkwo of the two. Right now, he's listed as our tight end 18, and Gunnar Helm is the tight end 25.
Right.
Tier four is, again, a lot of these are going to be dart throws for folks. What kind of risk tolerance are you going to be comfortable with? Okonkwo is a player to me that has never met his expectations, never been allowed to meet his expectations just because he hasn't been asked to do so. This is a player that's never seen 80 targets in a season, but he's fairly reliable whenever targets come his way. Had his best year of his career last season for Tennessee, and he's filling a massive void in Washington because right now, outside of Terry McLaurin, who else are they going to throw to on this team? have a handful of, unproven rookies. That's fantastic. But if it's going to be a player that, is going to operate, let's say 10 to 15 yards as that chain moving option, we saw what Zach Ertz could do. And this was a very diminished Zach Ertz. Now you put in a Zach Ertz with a heck of a lot more athletic profile. Well, yeah, I think he's a breakout candidate. Gunnar Helm in that offense, I just am a little bit wary because not only of what we saw from Ward last year and the struggles that he have. Yes, people will say that the last 3 or 4 games he definitely came into his own. We'll see if that carries over, but there are a lot more targets to feed in Tennessee, especially with the fact that they drafted Tate as high as they do. I think that they're really going to try to feed him. The system that is going to be incorporated in Tennessee that they brought Dable over, he has also his favorite player he's ever had under his wing with Wan'Dale Robinson. He's going to get a lot of targets. So, capped upside, capped targets, and a inferior quarterback of the two is going to make me a little bit leery of Helm. He's a player that, if you happen to draft really early at the position and get a McBride, or if you get, a Brock Bowers and you're just looking for a last round dart throw, just as I really hope he doesn't get injured, but at least I'll have this guy in case, that's fine. But I wouldn't really go much more than that.
Yeah, you also can't forget that they gave Bellinger a little pretty penny over there.
They did.
And I mean, he's not like, I feel like they're very similar. Like Gunnar Helm, like, he's a solid guy. He's a solid tight end, but he's not any much better than Bellinger. And money it's NFL's a business. Like
Yes.
at the end of the day, you got a guy making 10 million more. If they're neck and neck, they're gonna play the guy and throw to the guy who's making 10 million.
Yes. Well, not only that, but even if you take a look at what Gunnar Helm was in college and why they drafted him, he was a lot more of a possession-based guy than a red zone threat. And if he's going to be more of that in the NFL, then he really has a lot of competition for just simply targets and moving the chains downfield. With Texas, he ended up just having a handful of touchdowns. Granted, again, they also had a lot of people to throw the ball to, but this wasn't like he was some overwhelming force akin to like a Kenyon Sadiq that we see with the Jets this year. Athletically, he's fine. I would say he's more mid-tier. Like you mentioned, he's kind of akin to Bellinger, but he's not so much of an athletic freak where they're going to have to force the ball into his hands. He won't get off the field is the good news, but while he's on the field, I think he's a bit capped.
Another guy I'm interested in, like he's like he looked so good last year, but Harold Fannon is in such a bad offense.
Hmm.
How what can I approach like going after him when Deshaun Watson might be his quarterback and he's just what are we even gonna get out of this offense? Like
Yep. Yeah. I think that I have had few players where I've had more debates with my followers back and forth on social media than I have with Harold Fannon entering this year. The case for Fannon is that, if you want to just simply dismiss things and say, I mean, the offense is terrible. How on earth could he put up how on earth could he put up good numbers? Well, newsflash. I mean, the offense last year was horrible, and he still ended up as, the tight end 6 in his rookie season. So is there hope, even with a bad offense, that he could end up putting up decent numbers? Yes. But, and this has been my big bugaboo, if you end up having, Deshaun Watson back there, and Deshaun Watson, when he has started for the last several seasons, has been utterly terrible, you're going to have this quarterback carousel and Shedeur Sanders breathing down his neck. Who's going to start? I'm not entirely sure. Well, you know what? Question marks underneath center lead to question marks all over the field. And if it's going to be a team that's largely not going to be competitive, I would just expect them to run the heck out of the ball with Quinshon Judkins, who actually had a pretty darn good season, along with his rookie, from last year, Dylan Sampson, who's a really good receiver. The team spent an enormous amount of draft capital bringing in offensive weapons. Casey Concepcion, they brought in Denzel Boston. I think it's hard to just simply dismiss that. Plus, you still have players last year that, when you actually used them with Jerry Jeudy and with Cedric Tillman, they had a couple decent games. So, too many mouths to feed. A not great quarterback situation has led me to shy off of Harold Fannon. Again, nothing to do with him specifically, but if you peg your hat on the fact that he was a tight end 6 last year, and the only excuse that you're going to give is, well, bad team last year won't make a difference. Bad team this year should be the same thing. Be careful about what I said. Don't always gauge things off of last season. Take a look at a bigger perspective from this season.
One last thing for me, Evan, and as always, thanks for joining us, buddy.
Of course.
Appreciate you making the time.
Sure.
One last thing for me, Jack and I are in a dynasty league,
Okay.
and I'm my tight end situation is not good, so
Okay.
I'm going to be looking to draft hopefully a tight end.
Mhm.
And I don't know if I'm going to get one in the second or third round. I'm definitely not taking one in the first round.
Right.
So, who are your top three rookie tight ends, if there are three top rookie tight ends? You mentioned Sadiq. Who are the
Mhm.
other two or three?
Do I have to pick any? Like,
No,
you
you
know, like
don't.
as
No, you
Sadiq
don't.
and it's funny, and I had this conversation with somebody the other day. Um, the rookie last year crop that we had spoiled people so much when it
Yeah,
came to, production instantaneously with Colston Loveland and, with everybody else that Tyler Warren. We knew these guys were kind of coming to good situations on teams that needed to throw the ball, and it gave me confidence. Tight end at this year's draft was kind of, I mean, yeah, there's Kenyon Sadiq and he's on the Jets. If you want to wait from a long-term perspective and say, maybe Eli Stowers with Philly, maybe Oscar Delp with the Saints, those are probably the quote unquote tier one options. But again, they're on teams that I think they're going to be a little bit buried on the depth charts. This particular season, I don't think you can count on them to do much. Max Clare is somebody that if he didn't land with the Rams, I think that he would have had a better chance of being productive instantaneously. But the Rams have so many tight ends and so many other people on that roster. It scares me off of him as well. So, if you want to draft Sadiq, great. The Jets, I think we have well established that they're a bit of a mess. This year, I think that Delp could make a bit of a difference for New Orleans, just given the fact that, outside of really Olave, they don't have proven talent on that team. It's in a team in flux, both in the backfield and in terms of receiving options. Tyson's upside is there, but his injury history is also there. And having watched Delp in college, he's definitely a player that could be featured for this team. I do think that New Orleans defense is shaky enough that there's going to be a lot of passing there. So I would actually probably rank Delp ahead of Stowers for this year. Long term, though, given the age of Goddard, I think that Stowers will kind of come into his own, and he's a pretty darn adept catcher. So I would think that long term, he would be a player that I would favor.
I'm writing that down. Thanks, Evan.
Sure, of course.
Also, never bad to give a look at a Notre Dame guy, Eli Raridan
That's right. That's
in New
right.
England.
Yes, yes, I went to Notre Dame and got plenty to look at with Eli Reardon. New England, when it comes to the offense that they ended up basically transitioning over in the offseason, the good news for Reardon is he doesn't really have a lot of competition. It's Hunter Henry and that's it. So he doesn't have that many players to jump over. But the fact that, they brought in Dobbs, they still, they brought in Brown. I really think that they're going to rely on Drake Meg's legs again this year. And then you have a 1-2 punch with Henderson and Stevenson. How much is he going to get incorporated this year? I don't know about this year, but if the team opts to, move on from a handful of players, we had talked on a different podcast about, maybe Keyshawn Boutte moving on, or, if the team wanted to get rid of Pop Douglas, well, that starts to clear up the path a little bit more for Reardon. Or if they operate as more of like a, true two tight end set, like the, Patriots of old, and then you could run both these guys at the same time. The talent is definitely there for Reardon, though.
They loved some Mac Hollins last year.
That's true.
Love their big guys that can go up and get it. And I mean
He's
Drake May, he's gonna have a baller year. They looked great last year. They added talent. AJ Brown, basically a discount because of how bananas he was going in the offseason.
yes, yes,
But he's still a great player. Like
he
there's no
is.
doubt about that. And you're putting him in an offense that he can be great in. So that Patriots offense I think is gonna be a fantasy gold mine this year.
Hmm.
And it kind of was last year, but it was a little less consistent because you didn't really know what weapons to go out and get. It was like
Yes.
Hop Douglas 1 week, Booty 1 week, but I think it'll be a little more streamlined, and I
Hmm.
think we'll finally see the Travion Henderson takeover?
Yes. Yes. I just talked about that last night when I was on with some of the guys on Sirius XM on the segment that I was doing about how high I am on Henderson this year. And the other player that I think is really flying under the radar in terms of the signing is Dobbs. I think that he was so buried on the depth chart with so many other guys there in Green Bay that he never really had the opportunity to shine as much as he could have. He's really a quite steady receiver. And for being a guy that's, again, more of a chain moving option as opposed to like a flashy downfield kind of guy like Brown is, he fits this offense to a T in terms of what they really needed if they wanted to take that next step forward, with May being more of a pocket passer. So I think right now, yeah, I mean, Brown's being taken where he should be, but I think actually a discount right now on that New England offense is Romeo Dobbs.
Yeah. Well, this has been another great episode of the Gotham Sports Machine. Thanks for coming on, Evan.
Of course, of course. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Where can we follow you, Ev?
Yeah, so all my socials, I'm at roto_wizard on X or Twitter or whatever the heck you want to refer to it on. I am on all the time in terms of different kinds of podcasts. I'm going to be writing an absolute ton of content in August for Fantasy Pros, touching on my flag plant players this year, targets to look at and avoid. One of my absolute favorite topics, I was thrilled that I got the chance to chat about this year, is auction drafts, how to handle them, what you should do in terms of budgeting things. That's a topic that I've long loved, and that's going to be some content that's going to be coming down the pipeline. But yeah, at roto_wizard is where you can find me.
Great.
Sounds good. We'll see you guys next week. And I'm ready for some football. Let's get it going.
Right.